Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coalflesh Corner. Today we are looking at Scale 7, which is about regional identities and connections. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on Europe and Russia. And as we go through this video, I apologize if there's any coughing or the sound of me sucking on a cough drop or anything like that. We'll try to get through this as quick as we can and still get the information for you. Remember, you've got that worksheet. You need to make sure to, using this video, fill out the front side of the note sheet, and then the back side of the note sheet you will be you'll be doing your own research for that. All right. So there are different types of regions. We've talked about regions back at the beginning of the school year, but now kind of breaking it up even more. We've got physical regions, cultural, political, and historical. This video is going to focus on physical and cultural, and you'll do political and historical on your own. So we've got Europe right here, and Europe can be divided up many ways. It has been described as a peninsula of peninsulas. That it just kind of sticks out, completely surrounded by water there, with peninsula after peninsula, and then of course a whole bunch of mountains. But it can be divided up into three physical regions. So physical regions meaning divided up based on the physical features. So we have the Mediterranean region, which the Mediterranean Sea is right down here. And so the Mediterranean region is going to be anything that is touching the Mediterranean Sea. So that includes all of this stuff here. And so what you're going to have to do is you will look at an atlas and look at Europe and see what countries are touching the Mediterranean Sea. For example, Spain, France, Italy. But then there's a whole bunch more there. And then you have the Alpine region. The Alpine region, that is defined by mountains. And so we have the Alps here. So it's not the Apennine region, it's the Alpine region. And the Alps, it actually stretches across like this. Let's make that a little different. Well, that's not a good color. Like this right here. So any of these countries here, that would be part of the Alpine region. And then the Northern European plains, you got it right up here. So that's going to be all of this stuff here. And with what we're doing, we do want to go ahead and include Russia in there. Russia is kind of a weird thing where it's part of Asia, but it's also part of Europe. And so we want to include Russia in this. So that's your physical regions. And then cultural regions. You can pick all sorts of different ways to divide things up based on culture. But one of them that we are looking at is language. And languages are broken up based on what language they were originally from. Man, I typed that weird. So, for example, the Romance languages, they actually come, they're not about being romantic. They come from Latin, and that was the language of the Roman Empire. So, as the Roman Empire expanded, it took its language with it and spread it out. And that's why French, Italian, Spanish, they all are very similar to each other. They're different, but they're very similar because they are connected to the same Latin roots. And then you have Germanic languages, which was a whole other group that clearly sounds very different. And English is actually a descendant of the Germanic languages. And so you specifically are going to be looking at the Romance languages. And so you will figure out what those countries are right there and include that in your note sheet. Religion. Religion is another form of culture. And way back when, before 1550, all of Europe would have been considered Catholic. But around that time, you had the church start to break up and form some different things, and this is just based on the main religion that is practiced in that country. That does not mean that other religions uh, are not practiced there. So, for example, Catholic Christianity is still much of Europe, but there is also Islam, Protestant. There are Hindus and Buddhists. They still mix in. Those are just the most commonly practiced ones. So for your notes, you're specifically looking for Catholic countries. So those are going to be the ones that are in blue. And you may have to, once again, kind of looking at this and compare with an atlas if you need to. And if there is any country that has blue in it, you want to include it. So for example, Romania, it's got just a little bit right there that's considered Catholic, but you would go ahead and include that in there. Scandinavian. So Scandinavian, they are historically way back. That's where the Vikings were from, and there are some like beliefs of how like physically they look. But Scandinavians today, it is a region of the world that is typically very cold. Uh, they actually get less sunlight than a lot of the other places do, uh, and they have snow much of the year. But um, they're also seen as a very relaxed and compassionate people. They have very stable governments, and there have been all these different research things done, and the UN puts out this whole thing about the happiest countries in the world. And statistically, the Scandinavian countries, you got Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark specifically, are considered happiest countries in the world. Iceland and the Faroe Islands are included in there also. All right. So this is just a real quick thing that obviously there are plenty of other cultural ways to divide up the world, to create regions, and even looking at things like Mediterranean. You've got Mediterranean food, and you've got Balkan food, and you've got some of the Russian influence food, all these different things. And art, there are many different ways that you can divide up. So now that you have the information you need for that, go ahead and do some research for the second half.